Out of the 35,000 clinical trials that happen every year, only about 20% succeed. We can now predict the outcome of a clinical trial with about 90% accuracy before it starts. AI can actually solve things that were completely unsolvable a year or two ago. Then grew that from about a $20 million business to about a $100 million business.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential. On today's episode, we're joined by an entrepreneur driving innovation in healthcare through AI. From humble beginnings as a software developer to leading a startup that was acquired by Telstra, his path showcases relentless passion. This leader has held executive roles like CEO at ASX-listed companies while completing multiple degrees to fuel his technology vision. He shares his expertise on boards in public, private, and non-profit sectors, focusing on the intersection of technology, commercialization, and transformation. As the CEO of TrialKey and Opyl, he's leading AI solutions to transform clinical trials and patient outcomes. Without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Saurabh Jain.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the intro, Linda.
Tell us about your story and what's your background and key moments that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, totally. So software engineer by trade. Grew up in Australia, went to high school in the States, came back here around 10th grade high school. That was back in like 96. So, oh my God, like 30 years ago now. A very long time ago. Oh, 20 years ago, sorry. 20? No, 30. And that's when the internet had first bloomed. Came back from an entrepreneurial family, so set up an internet service provider in my bedroom back in like 10th grade high school holidays. Ran that for about 4 or 5 years, got a shop front, got about 2,500 customers, had a whole bunch of employees, and then exited that out to a company called Telstra, which is like the large local telco here in Australia. Did quite well out of that, and then spent about a decade sales commercialization. Then about a decade, I got back into the more the technical part of my career, software engineer, so I do enjoy the technical side. Then about 6-7 years ago, got my dream job as CEO of a publicly listed software company. Dream job for any kind of tech person. Was there for about 5 years, CEO for about the last 3. Then grew that from about a $20 million business to about a $100 million business. Then my wife and I, we had twins, best thing ever. And you can't have a company in like 13 countries and travel 2 weeks a month and be a somewhat present dad. And there were lots of other things I wanted to figure out about myself, about the world and those kind of things. So I ended up, initially the plan was to stop working and retire. But then I joined about half a dozen company boards and I do like an interim CEO gig that I've just finished now at TrialKey, and now I'm their exec chairman. So now my life, it's about 1/3 on half a dozen board roles in TrialKey. 1/3, the wife and I would travel 3 or 4 times every 6 months. About every quarter, we'll go overseas somewhere. And probably my main thing I do these days is meditation. I'm trying really, really hard to get good at it.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I wanted to ask, that's an inspiring journey you've had too. So where did this entrepreneurial spirit come from initially? Like, was it your upbringing? As a software developer, usually they don't have that entrepreneurial spirit. Sometimes they do the rare ones and become great. Like look at Elon Musk, like the technical background. But where did this come from, the entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, totally. Look, I think what it was for me. So I grew up in like quite a poor family, and growing up quite poor, like my parents always sent me to the best schools and all those kind of things. It kind of bakes in a poverty mindset into you, in which scenario like you'll do anything to succeed. In hindsight, like success was always a given. I'd chew through any wall to kind of get there. And it just ended up, well, you make more money doing your own business, or you make more money doing sales as opposed to being like a hardcore developer.
You knew that path. That's good. And also you mentioned growth strategies too, because, becoming a CEO is one thing, but you grew it from those millions. How much did you say it was again? You grew it from...
So we grew from about a $20 million business to about a $100 million business during those 3 years. So we grew about 50% every year and nonstop.
And what are the growth strategies that you use to grow it to that level? Because that's massive. In 3 years, that is a lot. That's definitely a feat to be proud of.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think what it is with sales, it's hard. I mean, often like people think you just get a salesperson and that's it. But there's all this scaffolding you need to build around a sales organization to grow properly. So you've got to have sales, marketing, you've got to have pre-sales, got to have people that set the appointments, got to have people that write the tenders. It's actually about like a dozen people that need to come together in a really, really cohesive manner. The other part about growth as well is you've got to somehow pivot the entire organization to be sales focused. So everybody thinks about like, how do we continue growing? Because it's kind of one of those things, companies that grow really well, often the people get very complacent and they start whinging about growth. But growth is so much better than the alternative where you shrink and, people lose jobs and things just don't go well. So the analogy I'll give is if anyone's ever bought something through like Salesforce, any like the really new age super sales focused SaaS businesses, it's like a really pleasant experience. Like everything in the entire journey is set up to make sure that at the end of it, you actually buy their product. And it's almost somewhat inevitable. And I kind of did the same for the company I work for, Urbanize, to make sure everything was set up for sales success all around the customer, the product guys, the marketing people. Probably spend about half my time doing sales meetings. All the exec guys would go to sales meetings just so everybody really, really focused on growth.
Wow, that's beautiful. And you mentioned you sold your company to Telstra. How much did you sell it for, if you don't mind me asking, or is that private?
I actually don't tell. I actually don't tell people. Yeah, because unfortunately, no one's happy for you. Unfortunately.
Really? Like, what does it feel like? Because I hear other podcasts as well, like when they sell their companies, and eventually, you could be on the beach for 3 weeks or whatever, but then you still get bored. So there's something inside of you that, you could retire. You probably could have retired, right? I'm guessing, because if you sold it to Telstra, was it a great amount that you could have retired? Or
Yeah, I did well out of it.
yeah. So
Well, I think what it was, so I mean, look, I took about 3 months off, and then I figured out I still had a lot more to do. Like, I actually wasn't complete. And it took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to do, and I did enjoy the sales side of things more, and that's kind of why I spent the next decade in kind of SaaS and sales commercialization.
yeah, because a
And I
lot
was
of times,
young. I was like 21, 22.
oh, wow. Yeah, still a lot more to give yet. Because I think
Mm.
with the entrepreneur spirit, sometimes when big founders sell their companies, they just can't retire. They just want to keep building and growing. And that seems like what you've done as well. So there's a certain mindset to that, I'm
Yeah.
guessing, and never being satisfied with, just
I,
being complacent.
I think there's something to that, though. This is my second time retiring. So now I work 2 days a week. I'm on half a dozen company boards. I'm doing a lot better the second time around because I've got some greater purpose that I'm doing. It's the wife, it's the kids, it's the meditation. So I think what it is a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, or people that are very driven, they need something to focus their mind on. They need some greater purpose that they're working for. And if you're lucky, you'll find that in work. But if you're super lucky, you'll find that in your family, your friends, and a lot of the internal things that you can do.
Wow. So how do you manage your time now that you've got you've retired twice, but you're still doing it? And what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, it's a bit ordinary right now because I'm still the exec chair of TrialKey, but hopefully over the next few months we'll get a great CEO and I'll kind of step back. Is I purposely keep my day very uncluttered. Look, I think like nothing great happens when you're busy. And we have this fantasy or this fallacy by having meeting to meeting to meeting being super busy that actually shows our worth and shows our productivity and shows how great of an individual we are. Something I don't totally subscribe to. So I actually purposely keep my day really, really free. So wake up quite early, do my hour of meditation in the morning, spend time with kids, get them off to daycare if they're going to my mum or my wife's mum's place. Have a couple of hours of meetings during the day, bit of time for myself. We try to cook dinner at home most days, put the kids to bed, and then do another hour of meditation and kind of go to sleep. So we've cut out things like TV. We've cut out a lot of those kind of superfluous things in life just to kind of free up as much time as we possibly can.
Wow, yeah, because I'm reading the book by Dan Martell called Buy Back Your Time, and it talks about just alleviating as much of the low-value task, and he automates everything and blocks out his time. So that's why I was really curious to know, because he delegates, like
Totally.
he's got the 4 quadrants, and he delegates everything or replaces himself, and it seems like you've replaced yourself. Like, were you planning to replace yourself? So
Yeah, I mean, I've got 4 assistants off in the Philippines, so they do a lot of my admin stuff. They organize my stuff. We've got a housekeeper that we have for about 25, 30 hours a week. So the idea is, like, I think, like, my time is, like, so precious. So whatever I can do to really kind of maximize my time on what I can do that other people can't do, I'm totally focused on that.
yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Let's talk about TrialKey as well. Like, what excites you about AI's potential, especially in healthcare? Because this is new. AI has just been, the hot topic lately. But yeah, in terms of healthcare, it's not talked about in mainstream. So tell us a little bit about that and what excites you most about it.
Yeah, totally. So, look, when AI first kind of became mainstream a couple of years ago, it was all about automating stuff that people already could do. But now what AI has kind of pivoted to, it's around doing stuff that actually was completely impossible before. So just a bit around what we did at TrialKey, right? So we got 350,000 clinical trials. We built our own little version of ChatGPT to pick up all these variables from the trial, about 700. So think like you upload a document and you'd be like, what's the protocol? What's the number of patients? What's the molecule? What's the compound? Who's funding it? What's the disease? And you pick up 700 variables from these kind of documents. And then you can actually build a decision engine that actually figures out what variables lead to success. So 3 years later, we can now predict the outcome of a clinical trial with about 90% accuracy before it starts. And that sounds super crazy, right? But if you think about it, like everything about how humanity interacts with drugs and devices and therapies is somewhat already known. But it's in this huge, vast data set that we normally can't access. And without AI, this would have totally been impossible. So it's kind of cool, right? Like AI can actually solve things that were completely unsolvable, a year or two ago.
Wow. Do you see any downsides to that though? Like, because there are downsides to a lot of things with AI. Some people fear it, and the job loss is one thing. And I spoke to another guest about deepfakes and scams and stuff. That, what are the downsides of this potential, and how are you guys finding a solution for that?
Look, I'll talk through the upside, which ends up being the greatest downside. The upside is you'll have like a near perfect allocation of capital. Like the money when it comes to clinical trials will go to the ones that are most likely going to succeed. So the good side of that is, so where the founder, the CTO, really figured out there's something to this is during COVID. There were 400 vaccine trials, and he used the algorithm to figure out, Pfizer and Moderna were going to be number 1 and 2, and AstraZeneca were going to be about 7 or 8. Published it, was in the Australian Financial Review newspaper, got lots of great press about it, and obviously that ended up what happened. But if you knew that beforehand, you would have over-indexed how much you invested with those two guys. They would have already started doing a lot of their factory work. They actually could have prepped up much, much quicker. So the upside is, like I said, there'll be a near perfect allocation of capital. That money will go to those trials that are probably going to succeed. Now, the downside is the problems that are really, really hard to solve, a lot of the neurological things, some types of cancers, those trials tend to not succeed. Because you need like this decade of research to happen before we have like an overnight success. Like every overnight success in medicine takes a decade. That's just the way the world works. So there is a risk that some of that stuff won't get funded. So you just need to kind of prep for that. And you need to just kind of accommodate that as part of the model.
Wow. So you guys are just to facilitate the whole thing, and then you don't have to worry too much about getting the funding. It's just the people that are doing the trials are the ones that are getting the funding. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a couple of use cases. People that are doing the trials, they'll run it through our platform for their investor presentation. You'll be like, hey, my trial has a 32% chance of success, or my trial has a 72% chance of success. And these are all my competitors trying to solve the same problem, and we're better because of this reason. Or they're about to do a trial and they're like, hey, what can we adjust to give us the maximum chance of success? For example, we'll look at things like the ingestion method. Is it a needle? Is it a tablet? Is it a cream? We'll look at how often patients come into the hospital, how many sites you have, how many patients you have. And all those are variables that you can actually somewhat tweak. So we'll help them figure out like what's the optimal way to actually set this trial up so it actually succeeds. One of the things we've found, which is a bit strange, but in clinical trials, in the third phase, obviously the actual mechanism, the drug is super important, but we've found the actual way the trial is designed is actually more important. And there's probably heaps and heaps of drugs that were amazing, but that had crappy trials or the wrong protocols, some of those kind of things. And because of that, they didn't succeed.
Wow. That's very interesting. Let's talk about leadership and a bit more on entrepreneurship as well. What leadership lessons have you learned from being a CEO and a board member as well? Because you said you've been on a board for many companies as well.
Yeah.
The leadership lessons you've learned.
One thing I've realized is I'm pretty crap at everything the first time I do it. Ask my wife, she'll surely tell you that. But I'm so much better the second time around. And being a CEO, like the first time I was kind of okay, went from 20 mil to 100 mil, and that was all kind of good. Second time around, I stepped in as an interim CEO for a consumer watch company. They sold smartwatches for kids. I was on their board, had an issue, founder had to step out. I stepped in as the CEO, interim till we got like a real CEO to take over. I was so much better the second time around. And now the third time around, I'm so much better as well. So it is a thing about practice that the more time you do something, the better. And then as I think about like what's made me better now is I understand myself a lot better. That's because of my introspection that I do, the meditation that I do, the reading that I do, the time I spend with myself. And I find when your mind isn't chattering away, you can kind of spend a bit more time thinking about someone else. What are they thinking? What are they observing? How are they interpreting the situation? You're not stuck in your own mind. You can actually spend a lot more time in someone else's. And then now the other lens, so I'm on about half a dozen company boards. So I work with like half a dozen CEOs, right? You chat to them, you mentor them, you're someone to bounce ideas off. you end up firing them, you end up hiring them. So I do think deeply now, as we're looking for my replacement at TrialKey, what kind of CEO will be a great CEO?
What is that?
I think there's only one, because all the boring stuff's given, right? They're going to be super smart. They're going to work super hard. Like that's just the ticket to entry. I think the killer thing is someone that's coachable. Someone that actually says, oh, okay, I didn't know this. I'm happy to be vulnerable. I have to be insecure about this. Then actually learn from the situation. If you start a conversation kind of knowing you're already right, you kind of lose this huge kind of learning opportunity. And I think that's what I find as a board member. They're the CEOs that do really, really well. The ones that will make a mistake, but will super learn from it, or will chat to somebody else and change their opinion because they've got more information, not someone who has this huge ego and they're just so set in doing what they think is already right.
Wow, that's interesting. But so what hard skills do you think are crucial as well as what you've learned, especially when now you've been surrounded by other CEOs? What makes a successful CEO in your eyes? Apart from just the being able to, like the skills, the actual skills.
If you think about what makes a CEO great, so it's the hardest job in the organization, but the really being a CEO, you get to see a tiny bit of everything. You get to see a tiny bit of finance, tiny bit of engineering, tiny bit of sales and marketing, tiny bit of legal, hopefully not too much, tiny bit of risk. If you're in a public company, a bit about the compliance that you have to do. So the great CEOs actually know a tiny bit of everything. So they're naturally curious to learn a tiny bit of everything. And what they do is they actually weave that together. That's kind of on the hard skill. That's probably the most important one. One more on the softer side is because again, the really great CEOs I've met, like they've already succeeded in life. Like they've already won. They don't need anyone else's validation. And when you have that kind of deep inner confidence, you can actually build a great team around you. You're not threatened by anybody. You try to get the best people. You're not worried someone's going to say something that kind of conflicts with what you're thinking. So then you can actually build a great bunch of people around you. Because it's only not about you. It's about some greater good.
Yeah, that's true. And also problem solving, I'm guessing, as well, because now that you see the big picture of every department being able to problem solve or maybe hand it to the right people. Is that what your thoughts are?
Oh, look, I think problem solving, intelligence, again, that's all a given. Like you wouldn't make it to the exec if you didn't kind of have that ability. But I'm thinking is like, what are the extra kind of key differentiators? So when I interview 5 CEOs, as I'm doing right now, I had to figure out that's the guy or gal that's actually going to do well.
Wow, the problem solving. Okay, cool. What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in this tech industry? Have you got any key pieces for advice?
Yeah, this will sound super unpopular, but you just need to work harder. Like it's hard to go great at doing anything at the start of your career if you're doing like 20 or 30 or 40 hours a week. So that was my core differentiator. I would outwork anyone. So you just spend more time and there's sacrifices, right? And sacrifice you might not be as healthy as you want. You might not have all the great relationships as you want. But if you want to be amazing at one part of your life, you often have to give up other parts of your life. So be happy to make that sacrifice if that's what you choose, outwork everybody and just get really, really good at your trade.
That's very powerful, yeah. And then when you're able to work and become that high level, achieve that high level of success, and that's when you start delegating and doing what you did, just finding the right people. Can you share a failure or a major setback from your journeys and the lessons that you learned and how you overcame those setbacks?
Oh, totally. I've failed so many times. So there's so many times which we've launched a product and it just hasn't kind of come together. But actually, no. So let me think about my greatest failure. Actually, so the company that I left to Urbanize, when I left, it was about $100 million business, and so today it's about a $25 million business. And that kind of sucks. So we grew 40% every year on year for 4 or 5 years. And now 3 years later, the revenue has not grown at all. If anything, it's gone back 5 or 10%. And the market's responded and it's super punished. It was my CFO that took over, who I thought was fantastic, was going to do a great job. So what I've kind of realized is, look, whatever I did didn't outlive me. Like it didn't sustain past me. So that was like a failure on me as the CEO that left. That I was not able to do like a jobs, right? And just build a machine and build a system that would outlive me and would continue to grow no matter what anybody else did. So that's probably my greatest failure. And that's what I do now in all these companies that I'm an interim CEO for. I think like, how do I make sure whatever change I implement sustains and is like almost unbreakable?
How do you do that? Is it just hiring and then just making sure, because like you said, you left to the CEO, but did you not have any things in place? Like, what would you do now in terms of, is it training it? And how do you keep that momentum up, like motivating people when you're not there? How would you do that?
Have you ever heard of a concept called an enterprise operating system? EOS. So there's about a dozen different kind of brands, different companies that offer it. But basically, it's a way to implement strategy in an organization. So it's the cadence of, your daily, your weekly, your monthly, your quarterly. It has all the structure for every meeting. It just kind of means that whatever you're doing gets totally embedded within the DNA of the organization. So there's two that I like. Metronome is a good one for slightly bigger companies. EOS is a good one for slightly smaller companies. So I implement these every single time. So then when I finish my interim CEO gig and go to the board, as I often do, there's all this stuff that's already pre-baked and everybody always has this rhythm about how they're working. And so when the new guy or gal comes along, one, they can't really break a lot quickly because there's actually a lot of stuff already in place. And then hopefully they get a bit of a running start, so there's a whole bunch of stuff already done for them. So that was the mistake that I made in Urbanize. I didn't systematize enough of what made us great. I just left it to great people. And so what I should have done is kind of make the machine that makes the machine kind of thing. So not run a great business, is figure out how do you build businesses that are great and make sure they sustain.
I like that. It's good that now that you've got those key learnings as well, and then you could just apply that. Hopefully your next business, like your next companies, will be able to outgrow you as well once you've put the systems in place. Let's talk about personal growth and inspiration. Who's been your biggest inspiration, and do you have any book recommendations, people who've impacted you the most?
Probably a whole bunch, right? Like Elon Musk, absolute rock star, outworks anyone, smartest guy he knows kind of thing. Probably some personal failures, but I mean, there's sacrifices we all make in life. But then just the theory about how you can go back to first principles and, figure out, then kind of go back up from there and figure out the actual core problem you're trying to solve. I've just finished reading a book called Super Communicators, which I'd highly recommend. Charles Duhigg Duhigg. So the theory of that book is and it's a learnt skill. There's a certain population which are really good at talking to people. And we've all experienced the people you meet and within like 10 minutes, you're like best of friends. And that's totally a learnt skill. So how do you influence people? How do you understand yourself better? And how do you communicate better with other people?
Yeah. Oh, wow. And I definitely agree with you that communicators, like great communication is key in order to get what you want in life and just to persuade people, especially in business. And storytelling, I found, is another thing too, to resonate with people, like to be on the same page, just emotions and storytelling. So I'm going to definitely look up that book.
On the emotion side, one thing I figured out, the way the mind works, you remember feelings and emotions much more than actual things. So if you can kind of lock something into someone's emotion, like it'll stick.
Yeah. And then it's more memorable how somebody's made you feel versus facts and numbers as well. So that's definitely something learning, especially when you're doing a presentation and whatnot. People don't remember all those numbers and things. Oftentimes they remember the story behind it too. So that's something that I'm learning as well. What rituals do you never go without?
So for me, it's the meditation, but like that's my thing. I do that 2 hours every day. I try to exercise a couple times a week. Every quarter, like it's locked in, I will go overseas on holidays kind of thing. Nice and simple. They're probably the only ones.
How long have you been meditating for?
So I went to this 10-day meditation course where you go, you don't talk, you don't read, you don't write for probably like...
Oh, you did one of those silent ones?
Yeah, it's one of those silent ones. So I did my first one like 20 years ago. Horrible experience. Oh my God, it's so hard. I don't know why I ever did it. Then did it again. But then I got a bit more hardcore into it when I became a CEO. And I would do about 30, 40 days per year. Because it was just nice to actually have 10 days by yourself, no one talking to you, just to reflect on, like, am I actually doing the right stuff? Because otherwise, you just go from meeting to meeting to meeting. You don't actually get that quiet time. So now I do 45-day courses. So I'll do about 2 every year. So 45 days, leave the wife, leave the kids, go off to wherever they've got a course anywhere in the world. And
wait, for 45 days, did you play?
Yeah, for 45 days, yeah.
Of full meditation.
All entrepreneurs are obsessive. I think that's a given. So if you're going to do it, you want to do it properly, right?
Wow. And what does it entail? Like, just, is this the type of where you silence, you're quiet for 45 days?
Yeah, so it's 47 days. So you've got 45 days of silent meditation in the middle, 1 day intro, 2 days exit. So you give your phone up, there's no reading, no writing. You wake up at 4 o'clock, you go to sleep at 9 p.m. and you'll do like 13, 14 hours of meditation every day.
Wow. I think I've read about that in a book before. Is that in India?
Yeah, so they've got about 200 centers around the world. So my last one I did in Mumbai in India. The one before that I did in the Blue Mountains in Sydney. I've got my next one booked in January in South Korea. So yeah, they've got centers all around the world, and you go and you sign off from the grid, and you come back a happy person who's figured out all of life's problems.
Wow. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
I mean, it'll be like to just start slowly first because that's intense. 45 days seems like quite
Start
intense.
with 10 minutes and then get to 10 days. I mean, it's taken me 20 years to work up to this. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it's the best thing ever.
What are the benefits that you've seen, like in terms of how it's
Hmm.
changed you as a person as well?
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing from a work perspective is like normally, like when you and I are talking, what
Okay.
I used to find before is my mind would keep chattering. Like it was always talking about something, it was planning something, it was regretting something. So now for like years, I've not heard my inner discourse anymore. Like that voice is like completely gone. So the super cool thing is, so now when I'm here with you, I can just be in this moment. I'm not stressing about
Present.
a fight I had yesterday. Presence, absolutely. And that's hard. And it took me 100 days of meditation to actually, 100 days in a year, so about a third of that year, last year to actually get that. That's probably that's the entry level one. Then you're present, you just remember stuff, like you're just super chill. It'd be like if you went to the gym for 100 days, 12 hours a day for a year, you'd be super fit. It's the same, but the mental version. So the mind gets very, very sharp. You remember things, you process complex thoughts much quicker. That's probably half the benefit. The other half is you're just kind of happier. Because that's when I kind of realized, like, I succeeded in life. Like, I've won the game, right? So I don't have this ego. I don't need to prove anything anymore. And then when you're that kind of chair or that kind of CEO, that's one life and has nothing else to prove, and you're just here to help other people along on the journey if you possibly can. Any advice you comes from a different place. As opposed to being that CEO or that chairman, that board member who's just like an insecure little child on the inside and needs to say something just to feel important or needs people to validate them, you tend to just not be as an effective leader if you're still stuck in that kind of child mind state.
Wow, I love it. Let's just compact that a bit because I just need
Hmm.
to understand the ego part too, because
Hmm.
oftentimes a lot of entrepreneurs, they want to get to the next level. They're very driven, ambitious. They want to
Yeah.
succeed. And once they've accomplished one goal, they want to aim higher. Is that something that you don't feel that the need for anymore? Do you think it's an ego thing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in life, often we're like a dog chasing a stick. Like someone throws a stick, you chase it. Someone throws a stick, you chase it. You don't spend enough time to actually look back and be like who's thrown that stick? Who's taught me this that I need to go do more? I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more. For me, that primary motivator was the poverty mindset. That I grew up with little, and I thought if I get more money, I'll actually be okay and I'll be happier. And about 30 days into a meditation course, that just completely disappeared. So that poverty mindset was gone. I was able to kind of check that bag out, kind of thing. And then I didn't have that motivator anymore. And then in my second course, the whole ego, I realized, oh my God, I'm amazing. I've succeeded. I don't need to prove anything to anyone else. I'm totally self assured. I've got my happiness actually comes from my internal validation, not my external validation. And then when you kind of get all those things kind of compounding as benefit, you tend not to have this big kind of ego.
See,
Hmm.
because a lot of the times upbringing is one thing is, a lot of people have a certain upbringings. Me, for one, being raised by a single mom and poor, you
Hmm.
tend to have this drive as well. Like I can relate to what you said, being poor and then you're
Hmm.
just motivated and driven all the time too. But now looking back at it, that you said to be able to get rid of that, it's pretty powerful. So I might look into that. You mentioned waking up at 4 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night, sleeping. Is that what you said before?
Yeah,
Like,
just at the meditation courses. Yeah, so
yeah,
that's
for
their
the
schedule. So they've got
meditation.
a goal. Yeah, totally. 'Cause you've got nothing else to do, right? So you might as well sit and meditate and go to your own little closet, and you're there hour after hour after hour.
And you don't fall asleep or you get bored at all? Like, it's just, is
It
it pure
is.
bliss at that point?
Oh my God, it is the hardest thing ever. Because look, normally if you have like a really shitty experience, like you can go talk to a friend, you can go watch a movie, you can go have a drink, you can do something to distract yourself. But
Mm,
when you're stuck in your own mind and you're battling a demon, which might take days, right? Because something horrible might have happened to you in the past, or you might have done something
mm.
horrible to somebody else, and that's now coming back and haunting you, and you're stuck by yourself, you've got no one else to talk to. It's horrendous. It feels amazing when you're free of it, which invariably happens. I've never not been free of a demon, but it is so, so hard. The way it works is whatever you experienced when you did it, you've got to experience that again, and that can be absolutely horrible.
Just sitting with
Um,
the emotion, yeah.
day, day 47 is amazing because you're freed of it and you can turn your phone on, make sure everyone's still alive in the world. But the prior 46 days can be really, really hard.
Wow, that's sounds like a very interesting experience. I
Mm,
definitely want to check it out because I'm curious about your work-life balance. You know, where you
yeah.
mentioned before we have to do sacrifices, and Elon Musk still does his thing, and he
Mm,
still works incredibly hard. You seem to have the right balance with your family, and you seem to
mm.
be very calm as a leader as well. But how do you maintain that balance while leading multiple companies and ventures and serving on
Mm.
all these different boards? Is it just all about delegation and finding the right people? What are some of,
Well,
yeah, advice on that?
probably the first thing I might touch on the first one about work-life balance. The whole working full-time, it's a scam by the man, and then like get out of it as quickly as you can. And by the way, it's not about income, it's probably a lot more about expenditure. Sorry, that's the other thing that I was afraid of, the need for conspicuous consumption. Hence
Mm,
not needing external validation. I don't need to buy stuff to make other people think I'm better, which by the way saves so much money as well. So first thing is work-life balance. As soon as you can legitimately financially afford it, make all the money you need, right? But as soon as you can, like just stop. Because life is so precious. Like I'm 43 now and I've probably lived half my life, right? And that kind of sucks. So I want to make sure the second half is like absolutely amazing and it's optimized for happiness. Because I think a lot of people optimize their life for the wrong things. They might optimize it for their kids, which is amazing as a mum, right? But then you got to, if you're not happy, if you've not filled your own cup, you can't fill anyone else's cup. Elon Musk probably optimizes his life for, changing humanity, energy transition, multi-planetary species. That's amazing. And that might give him a lot of happiness. But I think that's a second order thing. The first order thing is optimizing your life for happiness. And it's complex to figure out what gives that to you because everyone's a kind of a bit different. But once you've done that, all the other problems kind of wane into insignificance. So look, I'll have a CEO give me a call and it'll be absolutely horrible. And they have this horrible argument with his client and oh my God, the world is going to end. And the cool thing is I am actually one step removed. So I'm not like in the game. I'm like above the game watching everybody else play. So
mm,
that tiny bit of separation allows me to not kind of get caught into that same emotion that person's getting caught into. And that's totally what they need, right? To kind of get like a second opinion about what they're doing or how they're doing or how they should react to it. So I tend to not get stressed. I mean, there were two boards I was on last year, sorry, that the companies probably won't succeed in the end. But that's okay, right? It's a Darwinian evolutionary thing. Some startups succeed, some startups don't, some large ones fail, some large ones succeed.
mm. Wow, that's pretty powerful. I love that how
Hmm.
that you just still remain so calm and see the bigger picture things, but still remain
Hmm.
so calm, be able to problem solve as well.
Hmm.
What excites you about the future and especially AI's future impact on patient outcomes in general? Like so much is
Yeah.
happening in the AI space, but what excites you as well?
Hmm. Well, I mean, what I'm super pumped about TrialKey and why I spend so much time there is, like I said, they're going to solve a completely unsolvable problem that was so completely unsolvable a year ago. And how cool would it be that out of the 35,000 clinical trials that happen every year, only about 20% succeed? And if you could take that number up to 70 or 80 or 90%, imagine the impact for humanity about all the drugs, all the discoveries, and what that kind of means for us as a species. So I
Mm.
think that's kind of cool. I think AI is the best thing ever. It's going to be so foundational. It'll be, more impactful than mass transportation 100 years ago. It'll be more impactful than, fuel, more impactful than electricity. It will probably just completely change every part of our lives.
Wow. What type of legacy do you want to leave behind when you're gone? I mean, you've seemed to have lived a great life now and you're making the
Mm,
most of it and time is so precious. The beautiful thing is that you seem to be fulfilled and happy and you've accomplished so much, which
mm.
is so inspiring. But what legacy do you want to leave behind? And what are you still excited about doing as well? Like also AI in
Yeah.
the AI in your personal life, what legacy?
Totally. So it's kind of one of those things. If you asked me 3 years ago when I was a CEO, I would have been like, oh my God, I want to be a CEO of a $1 billion company. I want to be an ASX 100 company and all those kind of things. I refer to my previous comment about working full time as a total scam. So for me right now, and then if you ask me after I got enough money, semi-retired, I would have been like, okay, I'm going to build all this wealth so my kids can inherit it and they can kind of do well as well. So now, after the couple of years of introspection, a bit more time spent with myself, the meditating, a bit more reading, a bit more thinking, I don't have that need to leave a legacy. I'll tell you what I'm excited about because there's still some people that I'm sad about. I don't have this need to make sure I leave something for my kids because, like, if they're competent, they don't need my money. If they're not competent, they like really don't need my money. They just need to be educated really well. They need lots of values. They need lots of time with me, lots of time with the wife, lots of time with the grandparents. And that's what they'll remember. That's what will make them happy. I think kids are super important. Like that's as close as we actually come to reincarnation. Like when I'm gone, that will be all that's left of me in this world. Now, in terms of what I'm still excited about, like I had like life-changing exits from, a couple of different businesses. So it's kind of cool that I can actually help a couple other people along on this journey. In the same way that I didn't succeed by mistake, right? I got like two absolutely amazing mentors right now, a guy called Mike, a guy called Ian. I call them all the time. I go to them with problems, and they've actually been so fundamental to my success. So it's kind of cool. I get to kind of help someone else with that as well. That someone else might do really well, have a great life-changing exit because I've been able to kind of help them on that journey. And then on the personal side, which kind of excites me, I think it's a lofty goal, but like I want to be ambitious, right? I want to get deeper into this meditation, want to still lock in 100 days every year and figure out, is it actually possible for me to get enlightened in like this very life? And it's one of those things, the longer you leave it, the harder it gets because the mind loses its malleability. I'm feeling that now as opposed to 20 years ago. It's just harder to learn new things. So I'm super focused. And that's why I probably won't work full time anymore because it won't be worth the sacrifice to give up the chance to actually figure out, is enlightenment possible?
Wow. That's deep. I wanted to touch back on when you mentioned kids' wealth as well. There's a question there. I always hear it on podcasts as well. I listen to money podcasts and like business podcasts, and they always ask, would you be leaving your wealth to your kids, or is there a percentage you believe? Because sometimes you don't want them to grow up spoiled or just not valuing the money, you know what I mean? You want them to work hard and have the same drive as you as well. But what are your thoughts? Are you going to be leaving your wealth to your kids? Because some people say that they have to do certain criteria in order to access it. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Have you thought about that for when, you pass along?
Oh, totally. So this is one thing my wife and I still don't agree on, but I'm sure we'll come to some sort of agreement. So my going in position is they get nothing. Like I'll pay for their education, maybe help them with a bit of a deposit for a home, like 5 or 10%, but that's it. A lot of the reason that people want to leave money to kids, it's to fulfill their own satisfactions, to fulfill their own ego, that's how they measure their success, that they've been able to pass this money on to the next generation. But as there's a British saying, from Crocs to Crocs in 3 generations. Crocs are like those really cheap wooden shoes that with my success, I kind of sow the seed of failure in my kids by them thinking that they've got this safety blanket. So I grew up with nothing. You didn't grow up with a lot when you were young, but that's why we've succeeded, right? Because we suffered and we had that need. So I want to make sure my kids think they totally have that need. And if they don't want to work crazy hours and don't become entrepreneurs, that's totally cool. If they find average jobs, that's totally cool. As long as they're good people that know how to be happy and they find hopefully a balance in life that I was able to find as well. But I think the big takeaway, most people that look for intergenerational wealth, they do that from a deeply selfish perspective. They think it's not selfish. They think they're doing it for their kids, but they're totally doing it for their own satisfaction. And then they often think about, hey, criteria, that's about how they control their kids from beyond their grave. Because actually, a lot of people don't realize kids are like a different soul, a different being, a different living entity to me. They're actually not me. So I actually kind of don't have a lot of right to control them. I've got a bit of custodian over them when they're young and impressionable. I've got a responsibility, but I've got no right to kind of force them to do stuff as they grow up.
Wow. So your wife wants to leave something behind. I find it's a tough one, because you don't want them to stuff it, but you want them to like work as hard as you as well, like value things more. But, there's just a different balance there to get right. So
yeah, so my wife wants to leave them a house each, which I'd be okay with. That's not the end of the world. But it depends what country you grow up in. So we're in Australia, like everyone gets enough to eat in Australia. There's social security. Everyone has a house. If you want, you can get a house to live in. So they're totally going to survive, right? They're not like they're in Southeast Asia or they're in India or an impoverished country. They're going to get to university, fingers crossed. They get to university, they're going to go to college, they're going to study, they're going to hopefully become at least competent professionals. So whether they make 100,000 a year or 10 million a year, they're going to be fine. And it's kind of up to them to figure out where in that continuum they want to sit.
I like it. That's beautiful. What does success mean to you personally? How would you define success?
For me, the biggest thing that's given me happiness, success is totally happiness. It's being able to control my time. One thing that I've felt as an entrepreneur, I think why I succeeded as well, is I always had this healthy disrespect for authority. That's just been me. That's been my thing. And I've always had other people control my time, be it a boss, be it a teacher, be it a school, be it a partner, be someone else. So I actually have complete control over my time. I can choose what I want to do and not do. And that is my success. And that is my happiness.
It's beautiful. This has been a very great conversation, very enlightening, and lots of wisdom there, guys. If you found this valuable and you're watching on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. It does help. And if you're listening via the podcast, just please do me a favor and hit the follow button as well. Finally, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, totally. Probably the easiest place is on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you'll drop a link to my profile in the notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great conversation.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.